The wine glass slipped from Elena's hands like it was made of ice. She watched in horror as the dark red liquid splashed across the white keys of the most expensive piano she had ever seen. The glass hit the marble floor and broke into tiny pieces that scattered everywhere. Elena Rodriguez felt her heart stop. She was only 22 years old and had been helping her mother serve guests at rich parties for 3 years. But she had never made such a terrible mistake before. This was not just any piano. This was Marcus Chen's personal piano, worth more money than her family would see in 10 lifetimes. The party was in full swing around her. Rich people in expensive clothes talked and laughed while holding champagne glasses. They wore jewelry that cost more than most people's houses. The women had perfect hair and makeup. The men wore suits that probably cost more than Elena's mother made in a year. None of them noticed what had just happened. They were too busy talking about their businesses and their money. Elena looked around quickly. Her mother Maria was across the large room, serving food to a group of important-looking men. Maria had worked for Marcus Chen for 15 years. She cleaned his huge apartment and cooked his meals. She was the best employee he had ever had. But Elena knew that would not matter if Marcus found out what she had done. Elena grabbed some napkins from a nearby table and started wiping the wine from the piano keys. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the napkins. The wine was sticky and seemed to make the mess worse instead of better. Some of it had dripped down between the keys where she could not reach it. As she tried to clean the mess, her finger accidentally pressed one of the keys. A single note rang out in the air. It was a beautiful sound, even though the key was still wet with wine. Without thinking, Elena pressed another key, then another. Her fingers seemed to move by themselves, playing a sad and beautiful melody that came from somewhere deep in her memory. Elena had learned to play piano when she was very young. Her father had taught her before he died when she was only 8 years old. She remembered sitting on his lap while he showed her which keys to press. He would hum beautiful songs while she played. But that was a long time ago. Her family had never had money for piano lessons or even for a piano of their own. The melody Elena played was one her father had hummed to her many times. She did not remember all of it, but her fingers seemed to know what to do. The music was soft and sad, like a lullaby for someone who was lost and far from home. As she played, she forgot about the spilled wine and the broken glass. She forgot about the rich people around her. She forgot about everything except the music. She did not notice that the room had become quiet. She did not see that people had stopped talking and were looking at her. She did not know that Marcus Chen himself had stopped in the middle of an important conversation with some business partners and was walking toward her. Marcus Chen was 45 years old and one of the richest men in the world. He had built his technology company from nothing, and now it was worth billions of dollars. He owned houses in 5 different countries. He had everything money could buy. But he was not a happy man. He worked all the time and had no real friends. The people around him only cared about his money. Marcus was known for being cold and serious. He never smiled. He never showed emotion. People were afraid of him because he could destroy their careers with just a few words. He had fired employees for much smaller mistakes than spilling wine on his piano. But as Marcus listened to Elena play, something strange happened to him. The music seemed to reach inside his chest and touch something he had forgotten was there. It reminded him of something from long ago, something important that he had lost. He felt tears start to form in his eyes, which shocked him. He had not cried in over 20 years. Elena finished playing and suddenly realized what she had done. She looked up and saw Marcus Chen standing right next to the piano, staring at her with an expression she could not understand. His dark eyes were intense and focused completely on her. The entire room was silent. Everyone was looking at them. Elena jumped up from the piano bench so fast that she almost fell over. "I am so sorry, Mr. Chen," she said in a voice that was barely louder than a whisper. "I was trying to clean the wine and I accidentally touched the keys. I know I should not have played your piano. Please do not fire my mother. This is all my fault." Marcus did not say anything for a long moment. He just looked at her with those intense dark eyes. Elena felt like he was seeing right through her. She wanted to run away and hide, but her feet would not move. Finally, Marcus spoke. His voice was quiet, but everyone in the room could hear him. "What is your name?" "Elena Rodriguez," she answered, still speaking very quietly. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Elena was confused. She had expected him to be angry. She had expected him to yell at her or tell her to leave. But his voice was not angry. It was curious. "My father taught me when I was little," she said. Marcus nodded slowly. "That was beautiful," he said. "I have never heard anyone play that song before." Elena did not know what to say. She looked around the room and saw that everyone was still staring at them. Some people looked surprised. Others looked confused. A few looked angry that a servant had interrupted their important party. Marcus looked down at the piano keys, which still had some wine on them. Then he looked back at Elena. "Do not worry about the mess," he said. "It can be cleaned." Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her. He was not going to fire her mother. But she was still confused about why he was being so nice to her. Marcus Chen turned to look at his guests. "Please continue enjoying the party," he said in a louder voice. "The evening is far from over." Slowly, the conversation started again. People went back to their drinks and their business talks, but Elena noticed that many of them kept looking at her with curious expressions. Marcus looked at Elena one more time. "We will talk later," he said quietly. Then he walked away to rejoin his guests. Elena stood by the piano for a moment, not sure what had just happened. Then she quickly picked up the broken pieces of glass and finished cleaning the wine from the piano keys. Her hands were still shaking, but now it was for a different reason. Something had changed in that moment when she played the music. She did not understand what it was, but she knew that her life would never be the same again. 3 days passed after the party, and Elena could not stop thinking about what had happened. She kept replaying the moment in her mind when Marcus Chen looked at her with those strange, intense eyes. She had expected never to see him again, but her mother Maria told her that Mr. Chen had asked several questions about her. "He wanted to know about your father," Maria said, while they sat in their small apartment eating dinner. "He asked what kind of work your father did and where he came from. I told him your father was a musician, but I did not tell him much more. It felt strange that he was so interested." Elena wondered why a billionaire would care about her dead father, but she did not have long to think about it. The next morning, Maria came home from work looking very confused and worried. "Mr. Chen wants to see you," Maria said. "He asked me to bring you to his office today." "Elena, I do not understand what is happening. In 15 years of working for him, he has never asked to meet any of my family. I am scared that you are in some kind of trouble." Elena felt her stomach drop. Maybe he had changed his mind about the piano incident. Maybe he was going to demand that her family pay for any damage. "Did he say what he wanted?" Helena asked. "No, he just said it was important and that you should come this afternoon." He seemed different somehow. Not angry, but very serious. More serious than usual. Elena spent the morning worrying and changing her clothes 3 times. She had never been to Marcus Chen's office before. She had only seen his apartment when she helped her mother with big parties. She chose her best dress, which was still very simple compared to what rich people wore, and tried to make her hair look neat. Marcus Chen's office was on the top floor of a huge glass building in Manhattan. When Elena and her mother arrived, a secretary in an expensive suit led them to a waiting room with leather chairs and artwork that probably cost more than Elena's entire neighborhood. After waiting for 20 minutes, the secretary returned. "Mr. Chen will see Elena now," she said. "Mrs. Rodriguez, please wait here." Elena followed the secretary down a long hallway with floor-to-ceiling windows that showed the entire city below. The secretary opened a set of heavy wooden doors and Elena stepped into the biggest office she had ever seen. Marcus Chen sat behind a desk that was larger than Elena's bedroom. The walls were covered with awards and pictures of him with famous people and world leaders. But what caught Elena's attention was something else entirely. In the corner of the office sat a beautiful grand piano, and on top of it was a piece of sheet music. Marcus looked up from his computer when Elena entered. He was wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than her family made in several months. His expression was serious but not unfriendly. "Elena," he said, standing up. "Thank you for coming. Please sit down." Elena sat in one of the chairs in front of his desk. Her hands were sweating and she tried to wipe them on her dress without him noticing. "I have been thinking about the other night," Marcus said. "About the music you played. It was very unusual, not just because you played well, but because of the specific melody you chose." Elena did not understand what he meant. "It was just something my father used to hum," she said quietly. Marcus nodded and walked over to the piano in the corner. He picked up the sheet music and brought it back to his desk. "This," he said, placing the papers in front of Elena, is something that has been in my family for many years. It was left to me by my grandmother when she died 5 years ago. Elena looked down at the sheet music. The pages were old and yellowed, covered with handwritten musical notes. At the top of the first page, someone had written, Memoria Perdida in beautiful handwriting. It means lost memory in Spanish, Marcus explained. My grandmother told me it was the most important thing she owned, but she never explained why. She made me promise to find someone who could play it perfectly. She said that when the right person played it, I would understand everything. Elena studied the notes on the page. Some of them looked familiar, like pieces of the melody her father used to hum. But this was much more complex and complete than anything she remembered. I have spent 5 years looking for someone who can master this piece, Marcus continued. I have hired the best piano teachers in the world. I have offered large amounts of money to famous pianists. Some of them could play the notes correctly, but something was always missing. The music never sounded the way my grandmother described it. Elena looked up at him. What did she say it should sound like? She said it should sound like a story, like love and loss and hope all mixed together. She said the right person would not just play the notes, but would understand what they meant. Marcus paused and looked directly at Elena. When you played the other night, even though it was just a small part of this piece, I heard exactly what she was talking about. Elena felt confused and overwhelmed. But I am not a real pianist, she said. I only learned a little bit from my father when I was very young. I cannot read music very well. I just play what I feel. Maybe that is exactly what this piece needs, Marcus said. Someone who plays what they feel instead of just what they see on the page. Marcus stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the city. Elena, I want to make you an offer. It might sound crazy, but I am completely serious. He turned back to face her. If you can learn to play Memoria Perdida perfectly, the way my grandmother always dreamed it should be played, I will give you $100 million. Elena stared at him in shock. She was sure she had heard him wrong. Did you say $100 million? Yes, $100 million. Marcus returned to his desk and pulled out a thick folder. I have already had my lawyers prepare a contract. If you can perform this piece perfectly in front of witnesses within 6 months, the money will be yours. No tricks, no hidden conditions. Just you, the music, and one perfect performance. Elena felt like the room was spinning. $100 million was more money than she could even imagine. It was enough to buy 1,000 houses or 1,000 cars or anything she could ever want. But it also seemed impossible. Why? She asked. Why would you offer so much money for one song? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Because this piece of music is the last connection I have to my grandmother. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12. She was the only person who ever really loved me for who I was, not for my money or my success. Before she died, she made me promise to find the right person to play this music. She said it would help me understand something important about my family and about myself. Elena looked down at the sheet music again. The notes seemed to dance on the page, calling to her like voices from the past. What if I cannot do it? What if I am not good enough? Then you will have tried, and that is more than most people can say. But Elena, I have a feeling about you. When you played the other night, something inside me recognized the music. It was like hearing a voice from my childhood that I had forgotten. Marcus opened the folder and pulled out a legal document that was many pages long. This contract states that you have 6 months to learn and perform the piece. You will have access to the best piano teachers and practice rooms that money can buy. You will receive a monthly allowance for living expenses so you can focus completely on the music. And if you succeed, $100 million will be transferred to your bank account immediately after the performance. Elena's head was spinning with questions and doubts. This was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not in real life. People like her did not suddenly become millionaires. What if people say I do not deserve it? What if they say I am just a maid's daughter who got lucky? Marcus smiled for the first time since Elena had met him. It was a sad smile, but it was real. Elena, I am one of the richest men in the world, and I can tell you that money does not care where you come from. It only cares what you do with it. Besides, you would not just be getting lucky. You would be earning every penny by doing something that dozens of professional musicians have failed to do. Elena thought about her mother, who worked so hard every day and still struggled to pay their bills. She thought about her father, who had died with dreams that never came true. She thought about all the times she had wished she could help her family have a better life. If I sign this, Elena said slowly. And if I somehow manage to do this impossible thing, what happens then? Do you expect something else from me? Nothing, Marcus said firmly. The money would be yours to do with as you choose. You could travel the world, start a business, help your family, or just live comfortably for the rest of your life. I would ask for nothing in return except that one perfect performance. Elena picked up the contract and tried to read it, but the legal language was too complicated for her to understand. Can I take this home and think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. But Elena, I want you to know that I believe you can do this. I do not make offers like this lightly. Something about you and this music fits together in a way I cannot explain. Elena stood up, holding the contract and the sheet music. Thank you, Mr. Chen. This is the most incredible thing that has ever happened to me. I just need to make sure I am making the right decision. Elena sat at the small kitchen table in her apartment, staring at the sheet music for Memoria Perdida. It had been 2 days since Marcus Chen made his incredible offer, and she still could not believe it was real. The numbers and notes on the old pages seemed to glow in the afternoon sunlight coming through their tiny window. Her mother Maria sat across from her, reading the contract for the 3rd time. Maria's face showed worry and confusion. This is really what he said? $100 million just for playing one song? I know it sounds crazy, but yes, Elena said. He had lawyers write it all down. It is all legal and official. Maria shook her head slowly. In 15 years of working for that man, I have never seen him act like this. He is always so cold and businesslike, but when he talks about you in this music, something changes in his eyes. Elena traced her finger along the musical notes on the page. Some parts of the melody felt familiar, like echoes of songs her father used to sing. But other parts were completely new to her. Mama, tell me more about Papa's music. You never talk about it much. Maria's expression became sad and distant. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the busy street below. Your father? He was a dreamer, Elena. He believed music could change the world. He spent hours every day writing songs and melodies, hoping someone would notice his talent. But what kind of music did he write?
Was it like this?
Elena held up the sheet music. Maria was quiet for a long moment. Yes, she said finally. It was very much like this. Classical music with Spanish influences. He said it was the music of his heart, the music of our people mixed with the grand traditions of Europe. Elena felt a strange excitement growing in her chest. Did he ever work for rich families? Did he know Marcus Chen's family? Maria turned around quickly, her eyes wide with surprise. Why would you ask that? Because this music feels familiar to me. Not just familiar like I heard it somewhere, but familiar like it is part of me. And Marcus said it has been in his family for years. There has to be a connection. Maria sat back down at the table and put her head in her hands. Elena, there are some things about your father that I never told you. I thought it was better to let the past stay in the past. Elena's heart started beating faster. What things, Mama? Before you were born, your father worked for a very wealthy family. He was their private music teacher and composer. The family paid him well, and for a while we thought our dreams were coming true. Maria's voice became very quiet, but something happened. Something that changed everything. What happened? Maria looked up at Elena with tears in her eyes. He fell in love with someone he should not have loved. Someone from that wealthy family. And she loved him back. Elena felt like the world had stopped moving. Who was she? Her name was Isabella Chen. She was Marcus Chen's grandmother. Elena stared at her mother in shock. The sheet music in her hand suddenly felt heavy and important, in a way she had not understood before. Papa and Marcus's grandmother were in love. Maria nodded. Isabella was young then, maybe 25 years old. Her family had arranged for her to marry a rich businessman, but she did not love him. When your father came to teach music in their house, they spent hours together working on compositions. They created beautiful music together, and somewhere in all those hours they fell in love. What happened to them? Isabella's family found out about their relationship. They were furious that she was involved with a poor musician. They fired your father immediately and forbade Isabella from ever seeing him again. They moved up her wedding date and made sure she could never contact him. Elena felt tears starting to form in her eyes. That is so sad. Did they ever see each other again? Once, Maria said. Just before Isabella's wedding, she found a way to meet your father one last time. They spent one evening together, and they created one final piece of music. Your father said it was their love story written in musical notes. They called it Memoria Perdida because it was their lost memory, their lost love. Elena looked down at the sheet music with new understanding. This was not just any composition. This was her father's love letter to a woman he could never have. What happened after that? Isabella got married and became part of high society. Your father left the city with a broken heart. He met me a few years later and we fell in love and had you. But he never forgot Isabella or the music they created together. Sometimes I would find him playing parts of their song and crying. Elena wiped the tears from her cheeks. Did Isabella ever know about me? I do not think so. Your father wanted to tell her, but how could he? She was married to a powerful man and lived in a completely different world. It would only have caused pain for everyone. Elena stood up and walked around the small room trying to process everything she had learned. So Marcus's grandmother wrote this music with my father, but Marcus does not know that? I doubt it. Isabella probably never told her family the truth about the song. She probably said she wrote it herself. Elena felt a strange mix of excitement and sadness. The music in her hands was more than just notes on a page. It was the story of her father's heart. It was the reason she felt so connected to the melody. Mama, this means I have to try. I have to learn this piece perfectly. Not just for the money, but for Papa and for Isabella. Their love story deserves to be heard. Maria looked worried. Elena, this is much more complicated than just playing music. You would be entering Marcus Chen's world, and that world is not kind to people like us. What if he finds out the truth about your father and Isabella? What if he thinks you are trying to trick him? But I am not trying to trick him, Elena said. I did not even know about any of this until you told me. This is just fate bringing the right people together at the right time. Maria sighed deeply. Elena, I love you and I want you to be happy. But I'm afraid that this dream might break your heart the way your father's heart was broken. Elena sat back down and took her mother's hands. Mama, I understand why you are scared, but I cannot let fear stop me from trying. This music is part of my family's history. Maybe it is time for the full story to be told. What will you tell Marcus Chen if he asks about your musical background? I will tell him the truth. That I learned to play from my father, who was a composer and musician. I will not lie, but I will not volunteer information about Isabella unless he asks directly. Maria nodded slowly. And what about the money? $100 million is more than we could spend in 10 lifetimes. Elena smiled. If I succeed, we will never have to worry about money again. You can stop working so hard. We can buy a real house with a garden. We can help other families who are struggling like we have been struggling. And maybe we can start a music school to help other young people learn to play. You have really thought about this. I have thought about nothing else for 2 days. Mama, I know this is scary and complicated, but I feel like Papa is somehow guiding me to do this. When I look at this music, I can almost hear his voice telling me to be brave. Maria squeezed Elena's hands. Your father would be so proud of you. He always said you had music in your soul, just like he did. Elena picked up the contract and found a pen. I am going to sign this, Mama. I am going to learn Memoria Perdida, and I am going to play it the way Papa and Isabella always dreamed it should be played. As Elena wrote her name on the contract, she felt like she was signing more than just a business agreement. She was signing up to discover her own family's hidden history. She was agreeing to honor her father's memory in the most beautiful way possible, and she was taking the first step into a world that might change her life forever. There is something else you should know, Maria said quietly as Elena finished signing. What? Your father kept something from his time with Isabella. Something he hid because he thought it might be dangerous if the wrong people found it. Maria went to her bedroom and returned with a small wooden box. He made me promise to give this to you someday when you were old enough to understand. Elena opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was a photograph of a young man and a beautiful young woman sitting at a piano together. The man looked exactly like Elena's father, but younger. The woman had long dark hair and kind eyes. They were both smiling and looking at each other with obvious love. This is them, Elena whispered. This is Papa and Isabella. Yes. And there is something else. Elena looked deeper in the box and found a small piece of paper with handwriting on it. The words were in Spanish. Para nuestra hija musical, si algún día la música nos reúne de nuevo. Elena translated slowly. For our musical daughter, if someday music brings us together again. Elena looked at her mother with wide eyes. Did Did they know that someday someone like me might exist? I think they hoped, Maria said. I think they believed that their love was strong enough to create something that would last beyond their own lives. Maybe you are that something, Elena. Maybe you are the bridge between their past and our future. Elena carefully put the photograph and the note back in the box. She felt the weight of destiny on her shoulders, but it was not frightening anymore. It felt right. It felt like coming home to a place she had never been but had always belonged. I will do this, Mama, Elena said with new determination. I will learn their song and I will play it. The news spread faster than Elena had ever imagined possible. Within 1 week of signing the contract with Marcus Chen, the story was everywhere. Newspapers, television shows, and internet sites all told the same incredible tale. Billionaire offers $100 million to unknown girl for playing one song. Elena discovered how famous she had become when she went to the grocery store and saw her own face on the cover of 3 different magazines. The headlines were not kind. Gold digger or musical genius, read one. The maid's daughter who thinks she can play, said another. The worst one simply asked, is this girl crazy? Elena bought all 3 magazines and read them while sitting on a bench outside the store. The articles were full of details about her life that she had never told anyone. They knew where she lived, where her mother worked, and how much money her family made. They had pictures of her apartment building and quotes from neighbors she barely knew. She always seemed like a normal girl. One neighbor had told a reporter, I never heard her playing piano or anything like that. This whole thing seems very strange to me. The articles also included interviews with famous pianists who were not happy about Marcus Chen's offer. It is insulting to all professional musicians, said Dr. Sarah Whitman, who taught piano at a famous music school. This girl has no formal training and no experience performing for audiences. Mr. Chen is making a mockery of serious classical music. Another pianist, Jonathan Reeves, who had actually tried to play Memoria Perdita for Marcus the year before, was even more cruel in his comments. I have been playing piano for 30 years and I could not master that piece in 6 months. This girl is either incredibly naive or she is running some kind of scam. Either way, she is going to fail spectacularly and embarrass herself on a very public stage. Elena felt sick to her stomach as she read these words. She had not asked for any of this attention. She had just wanted to learn a beautiful piece of music and maybe help her family have a better life. Now it seemed like the whole world was watching and waiting for her to fail. When she got home, her mother was sitting at the kitchen table looking very upset. There were reporters outside their building and Maria had been afraid to leave for work that morning. They keep knocking on our door, Maria said. They want to interview us and take pictures. Some of them are offering money for our story. I told them all to go away, but they will not listen. Elena looked out the window and saw 3 news vans parked on their street. People with cameras and microphones stood around talking to each other and pointing at their building. This is insane, Mama. I just signed a contract to learn a song. Why do they care so much? Because $100 million is more money than most people can imagine, Maria said. And because you are not the kind of person they expect to see getting such opportunities. They want to know if you deserve it. Elena's phone had been ringing all day with calls from numbers she did not recognize. She had stopped answering it, but the voicemails kept coming. Some were from reporters wanting interviews. Others were from people claiming to be music teachers who wanted to help her. A few were from lawyers saying they could help her get even more money from Marcus Chen. But the worst calls were from people who were angry. You do not deserve this chance, one woman had said in a voicemail. There are real musicians who have worked their whole lives for opportunities like this. You're just a gold digger who got lucky. The message was so mean that Elena had started crying. The stress was making it hard for Elena to focus on learning the music. Marcus had arranged for her to use a practice room at a music school in Manhattan, but every time she went there, reporters followed her. They took pictures of her walking into the building and tried to ask her questions about her strategy and her chances of success. Elena had been working with a piano teacher named Mrs. Patterson, who was kind but worried. The piece is extremely difficult, Mrs. Patterson had told her. The technical requirements are challenging enough, but the emotional depth needed to perform it correctly is something that usually takes years to develop. I want to help you succeed, but I also want you to be realistic about what you are attempting. Elena knew Mrs. Patterson was trying to be helpful, but hearing about how difficult the task was did not make her feel more confident. Every day seemed to bring new reminders of how unprepared she was for this challenge. The worst part was what happened at the music school itself. Elena had hoped that other music students would understand her love for the art, and maybe even support her efforts. Instead, many of them seemed to resent her presence. "She does not belong here," Elena overheard one student saying to another. "This is a serious institution for serious musicians. She is just here because some rich guy is playing games with his money." A group of advanced piano students had even started a petition, asking the school to ban Elena from using their practice rooms. They argued that she was taking resources away from legitimate students who have earned their place through years of study and hard work. Elena tried to ignore the comments and focus on her practicing, but it was hard to concentrate when she felt so unwelcome. Some days she would sit at the piano and feel like crying instead of playing. The music that had once felt like a conversation with her father now felt like an impossible mountain she could never climb. The media attention also created problems for her mother at work. Marcus Chen had told Maria that her job was completely secure and that Elena's contract would not affect her employment in any way. But some of the other wealthy people in Marcus's social circle were not happy about the situation. "Mrs. Hartwell asked me yesterday if I put Elena up to this," Maria told Elena one evening. "She thinks our whole family is trying to take advantage of Mr. Chen's kindness. She said rich people have to be very careful about who they trust because everyone is always trying to get their money." Elena felt terrible that her decision was causing problems for her mother. Maria had worked so hard to build a good reputation with her employers. Now that reputation was being questioned because of Elena's contract with Marcus. Even worse, some reporters had started investigating Elena's family history. One particularly aggressive journalist had been asking questions about Elena's father around the neighborhood where they used to live. Elena was terrified that someone would discover the connection between her father and Isabella Chen. She was not ready to deal with that revelation becoming public knowledge. Marcus Chen seemed to be having his own problems because of the contract. Elena had seen news reports about his business partners expressing concern about his judgment. One article quoted an unnamed source saying, "Marcus has always been extremely careful with his money and his business decisions. This sudden offer to an unknown girl has some of his closest advisors worried about his mental state." Another article suggested that Marcus's competitors in the technology industry were using the situation to question his leadership abilities. "If he can make such an irrational decision about his personal money," one rival CEO had said, "how can shareholders trust him to make good decisions about company money?" Elena began to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. The contract had seemed like a wonderful opportunity when it was just between her and Marcus. But now it felt like the whole world was involved. And most of the world seemed to think she was either a fool or a fraud. The pressure became even worse when Elena realized that people were betting money on whether she would succeed or fail. Online gambling sites had started taking bets on the outcome of her performance. The odds were heavily against her. Most people thought there was only a 5% chance that she would be able to play the piece correctly. 5%, Elena said to her mother one night. 95% of people think I'm going to fail." "Those people do not know you," Maria said firmly. "They do not know about your father's music or the connection you have to this piece. They are just looking at numbers and statistics. They cannot measure the music in your heart." But Elena was starting to doubt the music in her heart. The constant criticism and negative attention was wearing her down. Some days she felt strong and determined. Other days she felt like giving up and returning to her quiet, anonymous life. The breaking point came when Elena arrived at the music school one morning and found graffiti on the door of her practice room. Someone had written, "Fake musician go home," in red paint across the door. Elena stared at the words and felt something break inside her chest. She called Marcus Chen from the hallway of the music school, crying so hard she could barely speak. "I cannot do this," she told him. "Everyone hates me. They think I am a joke. Maybe they are right. Maybe I am just a silly girl who does not know how impossible this really is." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Elena, meet me at my office in 1 hour. We need to talk." As Elena rode the subway to Marcus's building, she wondered if he was going to cancel their contract. Maybe he had realized that the negative publicity was hurting his reputation too much. Maybe he had decided that she really was not capable of learning the piece. Part of her hoped he would cancel the contract. It would mean going back to her old life, but at least the pressure and the criticism would stop. She could disappear from the public eye and try Elena walked into Marcus Chen's office with red eyes and shaking hands. She had spent the entire subway ride crying, and was not sure she could speak without breaking down again. Marcus looked up from his desk when she entered, and his expression immediately changed from serious to concerned. "Elena, sit down," he said gently. "Tell me what happened." Elena collapsed into the chair across from his desk and tried to wipe the tears from her cheeks. "I cannot do this anymore, Marcus. The whole world thinks I am a fraud. They hate me before I even have a chance to try. Maybe they are right. Maybe I am just fooling myself." Marcus came around his desk and sat in the chair next to her instead of staying behind his imposing desk. "Elena, I know the media attention has been difficult. I should have expected this and prepared you better. I am sorry for that." "It is not just the media," Elena said, her voice shaking. "The other music students hate me. The teachers think I do not belong there. Even some of your business partners think you made a mistake. Someone wrote horrible things on my practice room door this morning." Marcus's jaw tightened with anger. "What did they write?" "They called me a fake musician and told me to go home." "Marcus, what if they are right? What if I really am just a maid's daughter who does not understand how far out of her league she is?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, looking at Elena with an expression she could not read. Finally, he spoke. "Elena, there is something I need to tell you. Something I have been researching since the night you played at my party." Elena looked up at him with confusion. "What do you mean?" Marcus walked over to his desk and picked up a thick folder. "After you played that melody, I could not stop thinking about why it sounded so familiar. So I hired a private investigator to look into your family's background." Elena felt her heart stop. "You investigated my family?" "I had to know, Elena. The melody you played was too similar to Memoria Perdita to be a coincidence. I needed to understand the connection." Marcus opened the folder and pulled out several old documents and photographs. What I found was more incredible than I ever imagined. Elena stared at the papers in Marcus's hands, feeling like the world was about to change again. "What did you find?" Marcus placed a photograph on the coffee table between them. It was the same photograph Elena had seen in her mother's wooden box, her father and Isabella Chen sitting at a piano together, looking at each other with obvious love. Elena's breath caught in her throat. "How did you get that?" "My grandmother kept a secret collection of things in a safety deposit box. I found it when I was going through her personal papers after she died. There were dozens of photographs, letters, and musical compositions that she had hidden from the family for over 40 years. Marcus pulled out more items from the folder. There were handwritten letters in Spanish, sheet music with notes in the margins, and more photographs of Elena's father and Isabella together in various settings, walking in a park, sharing a meal, working on music at a piano. "Your father's name was Diego Rodriguez," Marcus said. "He worked for my family as a music teacher and composer from 1978 to 1980. During that time, he and my grandmother fell deeply in love." Elena felt tears starting again, but this time they were different tears. "You know everything. I know that they were forced apart by my family's prejudice and social expectations. I know that they created Memoria Perdita together as a way to preserve their love in music. And I know that my grandmother never stopped loving your father, even though she married my grandfather and lived the life her family expected her to live." Marcus pulled out a letter written in elegant handwriting. "This is something my grandmother wrote but never sent. It is addressed to Diego Rodriguez, dated just 1 month before she died." Elena took the letter with trembling hands. The Spanish was beautiful and formal, but she could understand most of it. Isabella had written about how she thought of Diego every day, how she had kept their music safe all these years, and how she hoped that someday their love story would find a way to continue through their children or grandchildren. "She knew about me?" Elena whispered. "Not specifically, but she hoped. Look at this." Marcus showed Elena another document, a copy of a will that had been changed several times. "My grandmother left instructions that if anyone could ever play Memoria Perdita the way it was meant to be played, they should receive not just money, but the truth about what the music really meant." Elena looked up at Marcus with wide eyes. "So when you made the offer to me, I did not know about any of this yet. I was just following my grandmother's wishes without understanding them. But now I realize that she somehow knew this day would come. She knew that Diego's child or grandchild would eventually find their way to this music and to our family." Marcus pulled out one final item from the folder. Another letter. This one written in her father's handwriting. Your father wrote this to my grandmother after they were separated. He never sent it, but somehow she got a copy. Maybe he gave it to someone else to deliver, or maybe she had ways of finding out what he was thinking. Elena read her father's letter through tears. He had written about how much he loved Isabella, how grateful he was for the music they had created together, and how he hoped that their love would live on in some way even if they could never be together. At the end of the letter, he had written something that made Elena's heart skip. Our music will find its way back to your family someday. Love like ours does not disappear. It transforms into something new and beautiful. Elena, Marcus said softly, you are not just some random girl who happened to play my piano at a party. You are the daughter of the man my grandmother loved most in the world. This music is your birthright. It belongs to you as much as it belongs to my family. Elena felt overwhelmed by everything she was learning. But why did you not tell me this before? Why did you let me think I was just taking a chance on an impossible challenge? Because I wanted to be sure. And because I wanted you to connect with the music for your own reasons, not because you felt obligated by family history. The fact that you felt drawn to Memoria Perdita before you knew its story proves that your father was right. Love like theirs does not disappear. It gets passed down through generations. Elena stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city where her father and Isabella had once walked together. This changes everything. All those people who say I do not deserve this chance. They do not know that this music is literally part of my family. No, they do not. And you do not have to tell them if you do not want to. This story belongs to you and you can share it or keep it private as you choose. Elena turned back to Marcus. What do you think I should do? Marcus smiled, and for the first time since Elena had met him, it was a completely genuine, warm smile. I think you should stop worrying about what other people think and start focusing on what really matters. You have 5 months to learn the most important piece of music in both of our family histories. You have the chance to honor your father's memory and my grandmother's wishes at the same time. But the pressure, the media attention, all those people who want me to fail, will always exist, Marcus said firmly. Elena, when you are very wealthy or when you try to do something extraordinary, there will always be people who want to tear you down. The question is not whether they exist, but whether you let them stop you from pursuing something meaningful. Elena sat back down and looked at all the photographs and letters spread out on the coffee table. Tell me more about them. About my father and your grandmother. What were they like together? Marcus's expression became soft and distant. According to what I found, they were perfect for each other. Diego was passionate and creative, but also gentle and thoughtful. Isabella was intelligent and strong, but also kind and romantic. They both loved music more than anything else in the world except for each other. Marcus picked up one of the photographs. Look at their faces in this picture. You can see how happy they were together. My grandmother told me once that she had been truly happy only for a brief period in her youth, but she never explained what she meant. Now I understand. It is so sad that they could not be together. Yes, but Elena, think about what they did create together. They made music that has lasted for 40 years. They created a love story that brought you and me together in this moment. And most importantly, your father went on to meet your mother and create you. Without their separation, you would never have existed. Elena had never thought about it that way. So maybe their love story is not really finished. Maybe it is just continuing in a different way. Exactly. And that is why this challenge is so important. It is not just about money or proving yourself to critics. It is about completing something that Diego and Isabella started decades ago. Elena felt a new kind of determination growing inside her. The fear and doubt were still there, but they were being overwhelmed by something stronger, a sense of purpose and connection that went far beyond her own personal goals. Marcus, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Do you really believe I can learn this piece well enough to perform it perfectly? Not because of who my father was, but because of my own abilities? Marcus looked directly into her eyes. Elena, I have heard dozens of professional pianists attempt. After learning the truth about her father and Isabella, Elena threw herself into learning Memoria Perdida with a passion she had never felt before. Marcus arranged for her to have a private practice room in his own building, away from the hostile environment at the music school and the constant attention of reporters. The practice room was beautiful, with tall windows that looked out over Central Park and a magnificent grand piano that had been specially tuned for her use. Marcus had also hired a new piano teacher for Elena, an elderly man named Professor Martinez who had known Diego Rodriguez years ago. Your father was one of the most naturally gifted musicians I ever met, Professor Martinez told Elena during their first lesson together. He could make the piano sing in ways that seemed impossible. I can see that same gift in you, but it needs to be developed and refined. Elena practiced for 6 hours every day, slowly working through each section of the complex composition. The piece was like a musical story with different chapters. It began softly and sadly, like someone remembering a lost love. Then it grew stronger and more passionate, like the joy of being with someone you care about deeply. Finally, it ended with a mixture of sadness and hope, like saying goodbye, but believing that love continues even after separation. Marcus began stopping by the practice room during her sessions, at first just to check on her progress, but gradually staying longer to listen. Elena noticed that he seemed different when he was around the music. The cold business-like mask he usually wore would slip away, and she could see hints of the person he might be underneath all his wealth and responsibility. The melody in measures 40 through 60, Marcus said one afternoon, sitting down next to the piano bench. That part always reminds me of something my grandmother used to hum when she thought no one was listening. Elena played the section he had mentioned, and she could hear what he meant. It was a tender, almost private melody that seemed to carry personal memories. She must have hummed it because it reminded her of my father. Probably. It makes me wonder what other memories she kept hidden from our family. As the weeks passed, Elena and Marcus began spending more time together outside of the practice sessions. He would take her to dinner after long days of practicing, and they would talk about music, about their families, and about their very different experiences growing up. I was always lonely as a child, Marcus told her one evening as they walked through Central Park. My parents died when I was 12, and my grandmother raised me, but she was dealing with her own sadness. She loved me, but I always felt like part of her heart was somewhere else. Now you know where that part of her heart was, Elena said softly. Yes. And it makes me understand why she sometimes seemed so distant. She was carrying a secret love that she could never share with anyone. Elena found herself looking forward to these conversations with Marcus more than she wanted to admit. He was nothing like the cold billionaire the media portrayed. When they were alone together, he was thoughtful, funny, and surprisingly gentle. He asked her about her dreams and actually listened to her answers. He remembered small details about things she told him and brought her books he thought she would enjoy. You are different than I expected, Elena told him one day as they sat in a quiet cafe near his office. Different how? The newspapers make you sound like a robot who only cares about money and business. But you are not like that at all. You care about people. You care about beauty and art and feelings. Marcus looked uncomfortable, as if he was not used to being seen as a person with emotions. I have to be careful about showing too much of myself in my business life. People take advantage of kindness in my world. That sounds lonely. It is, Marcus admitted, but it has kept me safe and successful. Elena wanted to tell him that he did not have to be so guarded with her, but she was not sure if she had the right to say such things. Their relationship was complicated. He was paying her to learn a piece of music, but it felt like much more than a business arrangement. Sometimes when they talked, Elena forgot about the money entirely and just enjoyed being with someone who understood her love for music. Marcus seemed to be changing too. His assistant mentioned that he had been leaving work earlier and seemed more relaxed during business meetings. Elena wondered if she was somehow helping him the way he was helping her. The progress Elena was making with Memoria Perdida was remarkable. Professor Martinez was amazed by how quickly she was mastering the technical challenges of the piece. You are learning this faster than should be possible, he told her. It is like the music is already inside you and you are just remembering it instead of learning it for the first time. Elena felt the same way. Sometimes when she played certain sections, she could almost hear her father's voice guiding her fingers to the right keys. Other times she felt like Isabella was sitting beside her on the piano bench, helping her understand the emotional meaning behind each phrase. Marcus often worked at his laptop in the practice room while Elena played, claiming that he could concentrate better with music in the background. But Elena noticed that he stopped working whenever she reached the most beautiful parts of the piece. She would catch him watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. "You play like someone who has been in love," Marcus said one day after she finished a particularly emotional section. Elena felt her cheeks turn red. "I do not know anything about being in love. I am just trying to understand what my father and your grandmother felt for each other. Maybe understanding their love is teaching you about your own capacity for love." Elena did not know how to respond to that comment. She had been trying not to think about the feelings that were growing between her and Marcus. He was a billionaire who lived in a completely different world from hers. Even if she won the $100 million, they would still be from different backgrounds with different life experiences. It seemed foolish to imagine that anything real could develop between them. But the feelings were there anyway, whether she wanted them or not. She found herself thinking about Marcus during her practice sessions. She wondered what he was doing when they were apart. She looked forward to seeing him every day and felt disappointed when business meetings kept him away from the practice room. Elena could tell that Marcus was struggling with his own emotions. Sometimes he would look at her like he wanted to say something important, but then he would change the subject and talk about business instead. Other times he would sit closer to her than necessary when they were looking at sheet music together, and Elena would feel electricity in the air between them. The situation became more complicated when Elena realized that Marcus was not just helping her learn the music. He was also protecting her from the ongoing media attention. Reporters were still trying to get interviews with her, but Marcus's security team kept them away from his building. He had also hired a public relations expert to manage the stories being written about Elena, making sure that the coverage was more balanced and less cruel. "You do not have to do all this for me," Elena told him one day when she learned about another way he had helped her behind the scenes. "Yes, I do," Marcus said seriously. "This challenge was my idea, and it is my responsibility to make sure you have a fair chance to succeed." But Elena suspected that Marcus's protectiveness was about more than just business responsibility. The way he looked when reporters bothered her, the anger in his voice when he talked about the cruel things people had written about her, it seemed personal. One evening, after a particularly good practice session, Marcus suggested they celebrate with dinner at his apartment instead of going to a restaurant. Elena agreed, curious to see where he actually lived instead of just where he worked. Marcus's apartment was even more impressive than his office, but it was also surprisingly warm and comfortable. The walls were covered with artwork and photographs, and there were books everywhere. Elena was amazed to see several guitars and a violin in addition to the piano she had played at his party. "You have so many instruments," Elena said, picking up one of the guitars. "My grandmother insisted that I learn to play several instruments when I was young. She said music was the most important education anyone could receive." Elena strummed the guitar softly, playing a simple melody. She was right. Music teaches you about emotions and beauty and connection. Marcus sat down on the couch and watched her play. "Elena, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you ever think about what will happen after the performance? Whether you succeed or not, this strange chapter of our lives will be over. Have you thought about what comes next?" Elena stopped playing and looked at him. His question seemed to carry more weight than his words suggested. "I try not to think about it too much. I want to focus on the music right now. But you must have some idea. $100 million would change your life completely." Elena set down the guitar and sat on the couch across from Marcus. "The money would be wonderful, and it would help my family in ways I cannot even imagine. But Marcus, that is not why I am doing this anymore. I am doing it because this music is part of my family's story. I am doing it to honor my father and your grandmother." The day of the performance arrived faster than Elena had expected, even though she had been preparing for 6 months. She woke up in her small apartment at 5 in the morning, unable to sleep any longer. Tonight, in front of 300 witnesses, she would either achieve the impossible or fail in the most public way imaginable. Elena sat at her kitchen table and looked at her hands. They were steady, which surprised her. She had expected to be shaking with nerves, but instead she felt calm and focused. The music was ready inside her. She had practiced Memoria Perdita so many times that it felt like breathing. Her mother sat down across from her with 2 cups of coffee. "How do you feel, mija?" "Ready," Elena said, and she meant it. Scared, but ready. The performance was scheduled for 8 o'clock that evening in Marcus's private concert hall. The hall was in the basement of one of his office buildings and had been designed specifically for intimate musical performances. It had perfect acoustics and seating for exactly 300 people. Marcus had invited a carefully chosen audience. There were music critics from major newspapers, professors from prestigious music schools, and several world-famous pianists. There were also business leaders, some of Marcus's family friends, and reporters from respected news organizations. Everyone who had doubted Elena's abilities would be there to witness her success or failure. The media attention had reached a fever pitch in the weeks leading up to the performance. News channels were calling it the $100 million concert and the performance of the century. Betting websites had made Elena's chances of success slightly better than they had been months earlier, but most experts still expected her to fail. Elena spent the afternoon in quiet preparation. She took a long bath, did some gentle stretching exercises that Professor Martinez had taught her, and ate a light meal. She avoided looking at news websites or social media, where people were posting their predictions about the evening's outcome. At 4 o'clock, Marcus called her. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Good. Nervous, but good. What about you?" "Terrified," Marcus admitted. "Not because I think you will fail, but because I know how much this means to you. I want everything to be perfect for you tonight." Elena smiled. Over the past month, as their relationship had deepened, Marcus had become even more protective and supportive. He had helped her practice, brought her favorite foods when she was stressed, and listened patiently when she had moments of doubt. "Marcus, whatever happens tonight, I want you to know that these 6 months have been the most important time of my life. Not because of the money, but because of everything I have learned about my father, about your grandmother, and about myself. Elena, I have something to tell you, and I want to say it before the performance just in case." Marcus's voice became very serious. "I love you, not because of the music or the connection to our families, but because of who you are. You have changed my life in ways I never thought possible." Elena felt her heart swell with emotion. "I love you too, Marcus. And that is why I know I can do this tonight. I am not just playing for myself or for the money. I am playing for everyone who has ever loved someone they could not have. I am playing for my father and Isabella, and I am playing for us." At 6 o'clock, Elena and her mother arrived at Marcus's building. The street outside was crowded with reporters and photographers, but Marcus's security team escorted them through a private entrance away from the media chaos. Inside the concert hall, Elena was amazed by what Marcus had created. The space was elegant but intimate, with warm lighting and flowers everywhere. The piano was positioned in the center of a small stage, surrounded by curved rows of seats that allowed every person in the audience to have a perfect view. Elena went to the small dressing room behind the stage to prepare. She had chosen to wear a simple but elegant black dress that her mother had helped her pick out. It was the most expensive piece of clothing she had ever owned, but it made her feel confident and sophisticated. Professor Martinez knocked on her dressing room door at 7:30. "It is time for a final warm-up," he said. Elena sat at a practice piano in a room next to the concert hall and played through the opening section of Memoria Perdida. Her fingers moved smoothly and confidently across the keys. The music sounded exactly the way she wanted it to sound. "Perfect," Professor Martinez said. "You are ready." At 7:45, Elena could hear the audience taking their seats in the concert hall. The sound of 300 people talking quietly created a low rumble that she could feel in her chest. Soon those voices would be silent and everyone would be listening to her play the most important piece of music in her life. Marcus came to see her just before 8 o'clock. He was wearing a formal black suit and looked more nervous than Elena had ever seen him. "The audience is seated," he said. "Elena, are you sure you are ready for this?" Elena stood up and took his hands. "I have never been more ready for anything in my life." Marcus kissed her gently. Then the applause began. It started slowly with one person clapping, then another, then another. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding with an intensity that Elena had never experienced before. The sound was overwhelming and beautiful, like thunder mixed with celebration. Elena stood up from the piano bench and looked out at the audience. She could see tears on many faces, including some of the music critics who had written harsh things about her months earlier. Professor Martinez was clapping so enthusiastically that his glasses had fallen down his nose. Her mother was crying and smiling at the same time, but the person Elena looked for first was Marcus. He was standing in the front row with tears streaming down his face, clapping harder than anyone else. When their eyes met, he mouthed the words, "I love you," and Elena felt her heart fill with so much joy she thought it might explode. The applause continued for several minutes before the audience finally began to quiet down. Marcus returned to the microphone, but he had to wait for complete silence before he could speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, "you have just witnessed something truly extraordinary. Elena Rodriguez has not just played Memoria Perdida correctly. She has brought it to life in a way that honors both her father's memory and my grandmother's dreams." Marcus looked directly at Elena. "According to the terms of our contract, Elena has earned the right to receive $100 million for tonight's performance. The money will be transferred to her account first thing tomorrow morning." The audience erupted in applause again, but Elena barely heard it. She was thinking about her father and Isabella, and how proud they would be to know that their love story had finally been heard by the world. She was thinking about all the impossible things that had become possible in the past 6 months. Marcus walked over to Elena and took her hand. "You did it," he said quietly so only she could hear. "You played it perfectly." "We did it," Elena corrected him. "My father and Isabella, you and me, all of us together. We finished their love story." As photographers took pictures and reporters tried to ask questions, Elena felt like she was floating in a dream. She had accomplished something that everyone said was impossible. But more than that, she had discovered who she really was and what she was capable of achieving. The evening ended with a small reception, where Elena met many of the people who had doubted her abilities months earlier. One by one, they approached her to apologize for their harsh words and to congratulate her on her extraordinary performance. "I have never heard that piece played with such emotional depth," said Dr. Sarah Whitman, the music professor who had called Elena's challenge insulting in a magazine interview. "You have taught me something important about the connection between technical skill and artistic truth." Jonathan Reeves, the pianist who had said Elena would fail spectacularly, was even more generous in his praise. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I tried to play that piece for months and never came close to what you accomplished tonight. You have a gift that goes far beyond formal training." But the most meaningful moment came when Elena's mother approached her near the end of the evening. Maria was holding the photograph of Diego and Isabella that Elena had kept with her throughout her months of preparation. "Your father would be so proud of you tonight," Maria said, embracing her daughter. "You honored his memory in the most beautiful way possible." Elena looked at the photograph one more time before carefully placing it back in her purse. "I think they are both here with us tonight, Mama. I think they finally got to hear their love song played the way they always dreamed it would sound." As the guests began to leave, Elena and Marcus found themselves alone in the concert hall. The piano sat silent on the stage, but the air still seemed to vibrate with the echo of the music that had filled the space just hours earlier. "So what happens now?" Elena asked. Marcus smiled and pulled her close to him. "Now we start writing our own love story, one that does not have to end the way theirs did." Elena looked around the beautiful concert hall where she had just achieved the impossible. Tomorrow she would wake up as one of the richest people in the world. Her life would never be the same. But standing there in Marcus's arms, surrounded by the lingering magic of the music her father and Isabella had created, Elena knew that 6 months after the performance that changed everything, Elena stood in the office of the newly established Rodriguez-Chen Music Foundation, looking out at a view of the city that still amazed her every morning. The foundation occupied 3 floors of a beautiful building in Manhattan, with practice rooms, recording studios, and classrooms where young musicians from all backgrounds could come to learn and grow. The decision to create the foundation had not been difficult for Elena to make. When Marcus had presented her with the check for $100 million the morning after her performance, Elena had felt overwhelmed by the amount of money. It was more than she had ever dreamed of having, but it was also more responsibility than she knew how to handle. "I want to do something meaningful with this money," Elena had told Marcus that morning as they sat in his apartment, sharing breakfast and reading the incredible newspaper headlines about her performance. "Something that would make my father and your grandmother proud." Marcus had smiled and kissed her forehead. "What did you have in mind?" music education for young people who cannot afford it, scholarships for talented students, support for composers who are creating new music. I want to help other people have the chances that I was given. Marcus had listened to Elena's ideas with growing excitement. What if we did this together? What if I matched your 100 million with another 100 million from my own money? We could create something really extraordinary. That conversation had led to the creation of the Rodriguez Chen Music Foundation, which had opened its doors 3 months earlier. Elena served as the artistic director, while Marcus handled the business and financial aspects of the organization. They made all major decisions together, and Elena was amazed by how well they worked as a team. The foundation had already provided scholarships to 50 young musicians and had started music programs in 10 schools in low-income neighborhoods. Elena's favorite part of the work was the weekly master classes she taught for advanced students. She loved sharing what she had learned about connecting emotionally with music and helping young people find their own artistic voices. Elena had also recorded an album of her father's compositions, including Memoria Perdida, and several other pieces that had been found among Diego's personal papers. The album had become a bestseller, and the profits were donated to the foundation. Music critics called it a masterpiece of emotional depth and technical brilliance, but the most meaningful aspect of Elena's new life was not the foundation or the album or the recognition she had received in the music world. It was the relationship she had built with Marcus, which had grown stronger and deeper with each passing month. They had moved in together in a beautiful apartment that felt like home to both of them. It was elegant but comfortable, with a music room where Elena could practice and compose. Marcus had surprised her by learning to play piano himself, and they often spent evenings making music together. I never understood why my grandmother loved music so much until I started learning myself, Marcus told Elena one evening as they played a simple duet together. There is something magical about creating beautiful sounds with someone you love. Elena's relationship with Marcus had taught her that love did not have to be tragic, like her father and Isabella's love had been. With patience, understanding, and commitment, love could be a daily source of joy rather than a source of pain. Marcus had changed too since they had been together. He smiled more often and seemed more relaxed in his business dealings. He had started a program at his technology company to provide better benefits for employees and had become involved in several charitable organizations. Elena liked to think that her influence had helped him remember that success was about more than just making money. The media attention around Elena had finally died down, although she was still occasionally invited to perform at special events. She had played at Carnegie Hall, at the White House, and at several international music festivals. But she always returned to her work at the foundation, which felt like the most important thing she could do with her talents. Elena's mother had retired from her job working for wealthy families and now served as the foundation's community outreach coordinator. Maria loved connecting with families who were similar to what she and Elena had been before everything changed. She helped them navigate the application process for scholarships and provided emotional support during difficult times. "It is strange how life works," Maria said to Elena one afternoon, as they watched a group of young students practicing in one of the foundation's rooms. 6 months ago, we were struggling to pay rent. Now we are helping other families avoid that same struggle. Papa would love seeing this, Elena said. He always believed that music should be available to everyone, not just people who could afford expensive lessons. Elena often thought about her father and Isabella, especially when she played Memoria Perdida during her performances. She had come to see their love story not as a tragedy, but as the beginning of something beautiful that had taken decades to fully unfold. Their love had created music that had eventually brought Elena and Marcus together, and now that same love was helping hundreds of young people discover their own musical gifts. Marcus had framed the photograph of Diego and Isabella, and it sat on Elena's desk at the foundation office. Sometimes visitors would ask about the picture, and Elena would tell them the story of the two young people who had created beautiful music together, despite the obstacles they faced. Love always finds a way to continue, Elena would say. Sometimes it takes different forms than we expect, but it never really ends. The biggest surprise in Elena's new life had come 3 months earlier when Marcus had proposed to her during a quiet dinner at the restaurant where they had shared their first meal together outside of his office. Elena, Marcus had said, getting down on one knee right there in the restaurant. You have taught me what it means to love someone completely. You have shown me that the best things in life are not things that can be bought, but experiences that are shared with the right person. Will you marry me? Elena had said yes without hesitation, knowing that she wanted to spend the rest of her life building something beautiful with Marcus. Their engagement had been covered in the newspapers, but this time the coverage was positive and celebratory. The story of the maid's daughter and the billionaire had become a modern fairy tale that people loved to read about. They were planning to be married in 6 months, in a ceremony that would be held at the foundation. Elena wanted their wedding to take place surrounded by music and young people who were pursuing their dreams. It seemed like the perfect way to begin their married life together. Elena had also received an unexpected gift when a music historian had discovered more of Diego and Isabella's correspondence in the archives of a European music conservatory. The letters revealed that Isabella had never stopped thinking about Diego, even after her marriage and throughout her life. In her final letter, written just before she died, Isabella had expressed her hope that someday their music would bring their families together. "I believe that love creates its own destiny," Isabella had written. "Diego and I may not have been able to spend our lives together, but the love we shared will find a way to continue in the world. I can feel it in my heart that our story is not finished." Reading those words, Elena had felt a deep sense of peace about her own love story with Marcus. They were not just two people who had fallen in love by coincidence. They were the fulfillment of a dream that Diego and Isabella had carried in their hearts for decades. As Elena stood in her office that morning, looking out at the city where her father and Isabella had once walked together, she felt grateful for all the impossible things that had become possible in her life. She had learned that talent and hard work were important, but love was what made everything else meaningful. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I have a surprise for you." Elena smiled, wondering what kind of surprise Marcus had planned this time. He was always finding new ways to show his love for her, whether it was bringing her favorite flowers, planning romantic dinners, or simply listening when she needed to talk about her work at the foundation. Elena picked up the framed photograph of her father and Isabella from her desk and looked at their young, hopeful faces. "Thank you," she whispered to them. "Thank you for believing that love could find a way." As Elena prepared to leave the office and meet Marcus for whatever surprise he had planned, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. A year ago, she had been a struggling young woman with big dreams but no clear path to achieve them. Today, she was successful, wealthy, and deeply in love with a man who understood and supported her dreams. But the most important thing Elena had gained was not money or fame or even love. It was the knowledge that she was capable of achieving extraordinary things when she was brave enough to try. She had learned that the biggest obstacles in life were often the fears and doubts that existed only in her own mind. Elena locked her office door and headed toward the elevator, thinking about all the young musicians who were practicing in the foundation's rooms at that moment. Each of them had their own dreams, and